It's TA with MK. It's TA with MK. Gents and ladies, no time to waste. Don't be afraid, it's time to trade. Let's start your brains like high-speed trains. Storm these games like hurricanes. It's time to save this herd this days. Put on your cape and learn the phrase. It's TA with MK. It's TA with MK. Hello there, my crypto and YouTube friends. Welcome back to another episode of TA with MK. My name is MK, and in today's episode, we're going to do something just a little bit different than we normally do, and a little bit different than what most crypto YouTube channels do. We're going to avoid price predictions altogether. You know, most channels, mine included, like to say, hey, we think price is going to go here, here, or here over the next 24, 48, 72 hours, 2 weeks, 1 month, whatever it is, right? And, you know, as a viewer, you're left there to go, hey, let's hope this guy's right, and when it hits this price, we're going to buy it, or we're going to sell it, or we're going to do whatever, right? And maybe I'm giving myself too much credit. I highly doubt any of you follow anything I have to say, but the point is that's what most crypto YouTube channels do, mine included. I don't ever use the word predict on my channel. I've always said that I don't think trading is predicting. It's more having a strategy that involves playing the odds and percentages, and, you know, managing risk, and so on and so forth. But what we're going to do in today's video is we're going to take the Bitcoin chart, combine it with the halving schedule, and we're going to try to hypothesize or come up with what we think is the best time frame to buy Bitcoin. Because at the end of the day, if you knew, hey, this is the time frame that if I buy is the best deal, you know, best discount. It'd be like if someone said, hey, you're looking to buy a car, right? But, you know, it's at this price, and you're like, well, that's a fair price. But they're like, well, if you just wait until, you know, here, a month and a half from now, every single year at this exact time, it's the cheapest. It just happens every time. And you're like, really? And then you start looking over the course of history, and history says, hey, they're right. Like, the cars are always cheaper in the month of June, or whatever it is, right? Well, why wouldn't you? If you knew you could get the best deal at a certain time, would you not, you know, go for it? Well, I know I would, so... At any rate, we're going to go ahead and dive into the Bitcoin chart today and try to, again, hypothesize or come up with what we think based on previous price action and the history of the halving of when is the best time to accumulate Bitcoin for the best deal and the best long-term success. If you guys are liking the content, please remember to like and subscribe, and let's go. All right, before we jump into the chart, I'm going to quickly butcher an explanation of Bitcoin halving. I'm going to use this article on Coindesk.com. I will leave a link in the description, and I will also leave a link in the description to another YouTube video that I found where a fellow YouTuber explains it a lot better than I can. But basically, it says here, the last Bitcoin halving took place on May 11th of 2020, and the next one will likely occur in 2024. And the reason it says likely is that the way the Bitcoin halving works is as these miners basically unearth or put a Bitcoin into circulation, which over the past year or so has been happening about every 10 minutes, they get a reward, right? And what happens whenever they've done every 210,000 blocks worth of Bitcoin, then there is the halving, right? And at that point, they cut their rewards in half, which the idea there is that, okay, there's less incentive for the miners to continue to unearth Bitcoin, but the demand for it should stay the same. Therefore, the price should continue to go up. And then by the year 2140, it's estimated that the entire 21 million Bitcoin will be in circulation. And the reason why it's not a set date is, again, they have to unearth a certain amount, which is this 210,000, before the next halving. It's just up to this point in Bitcoin's very short history of 2009-ish to today, it's been about every 4 years roughly that the 210,000 blocks have been unearthed or released to circulation, and so they have the halving. And the next one is estimated on a chart over here that we'll go over in a minute to happen around 2024, roughly around March. Now, the chart that we're going to spend our time on today, or the majority of our time on, is this Bitstamp 5-day chart. Now, the reason that I use the Bitstamp chart on Tradingview is it's the only chart I've found that has data that goes back, in this case, it goes back to as far as 2011, the end of 2011. And I haven't found another chart on TradingView that has any more data. If you know of one, leave me a comment in the comments section, because I would love to have a different chart that goes back to 2009 or 2010. Now, of course, on Google, you can find little line charts and stuff that give you that history, but As far as Tradingview goes, which is what I use to chart coins, this is just the chart that has the most history that I've found. Now, I will zoom in and we're going to show you this. This is just something that I copy and pasted off Google. It shows the Bitcoin halvings up to this point. Now it shows that in 2012, when they reached their 210,000, blocks mined, that on November 28th they had their first halving, right, which cut the miners' rewards in half, as we discussed in the previous segment. 2016, so roughly 4 years later, in July, it happened on the 9th of July. 2020, which would have been roughly 4 years later again, just 2 months earlier, it happened on May 11th, and the next Bitcoin halving is projected to happen in 2024, around the beginning of March. Okay, now if you're a subscriber to my channel and watch my videos on a regular basis, you will know I have a habit of making some pretty noisy or messy charts, and this one will be no different. But bear with me, I'm going to go over a few different things and some ideas that I have here. So if you're somebody that subscribes to the lengthening cycle idea, there is some data to suggest that there was some truth to that and a possibility that that could have happened or still could happen this cycle, right? And you don't have to look any further than these red vertical lines I have on my chart, along with these red date stamps to show that, hey, in 2012, the end of November, that was this Bitcoin halving, right? Happened right at the end of November. And the blow-off top happened 361-ish days later. So basically 1 year later from that halving, blow-off top, right? Then we go to the 2016, beginning-ish of July. That halving, that's marked by this red vertical line here. Blow off top, 521 days. So almost 160, or exactly 160 days, added to that cycle between the halving and when the actual blow off top happened, right? And then this cycle, if this was the top, it actually was very similar to the last cycle, where it was only 546 days between the halving, which happened on May 11th of 2020, and this potential top, right? If you're somebody that subscribed to the lengthening cycle, let's just say, another 160 days would have been added to that. I actually marked that up here in purple to say that'd be around 700 days, a little over 700 days. We're past that, so could it actually be more than that? Could it be another month and all of a sudden we have another crazy run? I mean, anything's possible, but if you are someone that subscribes to the lengthening cycle idea, 546 days is, 25 days, 25 days more than 521. So the cycle was lengthened by 20-something days. Okie dokie. Now, next, we're just going to go into some of the coincidences that I've ran into as I dived kind of deeper into the charts, and I'll do my best to zoom in as I explain these or show these. But the first one I wanted to just go over was the time frame, or the amount of days that happened between the 2013 top and the 2017 top. And I've notated that down here with this blue date stamp, that it was 1,476 days between top to top, right? Now, let's just make the assumption that the November, or I guess the October top of this previous year was the top of this bull run. Well, from the 2017 top in mid-December until then would be 1,426 days. So both a little over 1,400 days, both less than 1,500, both pretty darn close. All right, now we've cleaned the chart up a little bit just to go over the remaining few things I have on this chart to go over, and the next one's going to be from the time frame between the top of each cycle that we've had so far to the bottom, right? So the 2013 top until the bottom, which obviously the bottom actually ranged for quite some time, but it still ended up holding up as the bottom, happened in about 405 days, right? So we're looking at about a little over a year, about 13 months, even a little bit over 13 months, and that was top to bottom. And then you fast forward to 2017, that top, which was late December, until its bottom in the following year in early December, happened in about 360 days, which is basically exactly a year, right? So the difference was basically what amounted to a month between that top and that bottom, but both happened around the end or beginning of the following year. So almost one full calendar year later, but you were looking at what potentially ended up being the bottom. Now, the next unique thing that I ran into as I was diving into the charts is the time frame that happened between that quote-unquote bottom and when it was able to break out. And what I mean by break out is as I was kind of studying these charts, each time you had the blow off top, so here you have the blow off top right in 2013, and then you had its recovery bounce, which I won't show you the fib retracement for it, but just trust me that it was basically around the 0.5. And what I mean by that is between this top, this bottom, and its recovery bounce, it recovered about 50% of the bounce before it ultimately rolled over, right? So from that point, and then if we fast forward to the 2017 blow off top, this top to this original bottom that was holding up, and its relief bounce, you had also between a 50 and 60% bounce, and ultimately, you know, we'll just call that the relief bounce. And so what I mean when I say from bottom to breakout, you had, in this case, the first time, the first cycle, you had 930 days between the time that it made its last significant relief bounce to the bottom, to this long round of accumulation, before it finally broke above that, retested, and went kind of parabolic, right? 930 days. Then they fast forward to the 2017 cycle, and the same thing. You had its last significant relief bounce, and then, you know, long rounded bottom. Now, this cycle was completely different. It had a crazy run in the middle of 2019, where it basically went up to that level, even peaked its head above it, obviously turned into a bull trap, and it ultimately fell, and then COVID and so on and so forth. But ultimately, between the time that it was able to break out from that and go on a parabolic run, it was 900 days. So you had 930 days and 900 days. Now, I'm sure someday when I pass away, they'll put on my gravestone, here was the YouTuber that said a lot to say very little. I'm sure I could have summed this up a lot quicker, but I just find this stuff fascinating, so I thought I would share it with you. But ultimately, I guess what I wanted to have you take away from this video is, to me, the best time to buy Bitcoin, if this was in fact the top, which there's a lot of other charts and indicators that I've shown in previous videos that would suggest that we have seen our top for this cycle. And that's not even, it doesn't have anything to do with all of the inflation stuff going on, the war in Ukraine and so forth. It just, other indicators and charts that had nothing to do with any of that would have suggested that we've hit our top. Well, if that is the case, if we just go back here and say, okay, from top to ultimately the bottom was, you know, around 400 days, right? This top right here to this bottom wasn't too much different, but, you know, 300, about a calendar year. Let's just go on the conservative side of things and go with the first cycle and say, hey, 400 days from this top to when I think's the best time to buy Bitcoin would put us, you know, roughly at the end of this year or the beginning of 2023. I think that's going to be your best time to accumulate Bitcoin. And then just to put on top of that, just to hypothesize what would then be the top of the next bull run, I would say sometime around the late summer of 2025. That's, of course, just a prediction, which is not something I really like to do. But hey, maybe someday it'll make me famous. We'll see. I do appreciate you guys sticking around and watching the whole video if you made it to this point. If you guys are liking the content, please remember to like and subscribe. We'll catch you next time. It's